The front door swung open, but no one stepped inside. Plates sat half-eaten on the dining table, the faint smell of dinner still lingering in the air. A kettle whistled softly on the stove, its shrill note echoing through empty rooms. Shoes were lined up neatly by the door, jackets hung on hooks, and the family car was still in the driveway. Yet the family, every single one of them, was gone. Vanished. As if they had never existed. No signs of struggle, no notes, nothing taken. The house seemed alive, but no one was home. Neighbors whispered when they noticed the silence. The mail piled up on the porch. Lights flicked on during the day, but no shadows moved. Even the family dog, normally boisterous and protective, wandered the yard alone, whining softly at the door. Investigators would later stand in that same living room, staring at the scene, unable to find a single clue. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. It all began, inconspicuously, on a sleepy Sunday morning. The town itself was the kind that everyone knew each other in, where doors weren't always locked and children ran freely to neighbors' houses. The streets smelled faintly of cut grass and coffee brewing in kitchens. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and the perfect place for a family to live without fear. But what no one noticed that morning would become the anchor of one of the most baffling mysteries the town had ever seen. The family had been there for years. A father, mother, 2 young children, and a teenage son. Friends described them as quiet, polite, ordinary. They smiled when greeted. They waved to neighbors from the driveway. They laughed on warm summer evenings. They didn't host grand parties or draw attention. They blended into the rhythm of the town, like a heartbeat you barely noticed, but would miss if it stopped. Investigators would later realize that this very ordinariness made their disappearance even more chilling. On the morning of their disappearance, the father kissed his wife as he left for work. The mother packed sandwiches for the children's school lunches, humming softly while the younger child tied his shoelaces. The teenage son argued with his mother about forgetting his gym shoes, but eventually found them tucked under the bed. Every motion was mundane, predictable, safe. No one could have guessed that within hours the house they had left in such calm order would become a haunting, empty shell. But what no one noticed was subtle, almost invisible. A package left unopened at the doorstep, a single plate in the sink with a bite taken from it, a calendar on the wall with a day circled in faint pencil, but no event written next to it. These small details wouldn't have raised suspicion on any other day. Yet, they became the breadcrumbs investigators would obsess over for months, desperate for an explanation that never came. Neighbors first realized something was wrong when the youngest child's bike remained chained to the railing all week, the tires slowly deflating. Mail stacked higher, and the usually diligent father's truck sat untouched, its engine cold. One neighbor, Mrs. Harper, walked by the house every morning and couldn't shake the feeling that it looked wrong. "It's the little things," she said. The blinds were crooked, like someone left in a hurry, but everything else was perfect, too perfect. Inside the house, the living room was unnervingly still. The TV hummed quietly, paused mid-show. A chair tipped slightly as if someone had just stood up. The mother's knitting sat in her lap, needles halfway through a stitch. Upstairs, beds were unmade, clothes folded and stacked in drawers. The family's routines were frozen in time. The dog, pacing nervously, sniffed at the bedrooms as if searching for a scent it could no longer find. Investigators would later say it was as though the house itself had swallowed the family whole. But even as the authorities stepped in, asking questions and knocking on doors, the town remained on edge. Teachers at the children's school confirmed that no one had seen them that morning. Friends said goodbye the night before, but none had heard a single unusual word or warning. Phones went unanswered, texts unread. Even the bank noted that no transactions had occurred after that weekend. The world outside the house had carried on, oblivious, while the mystery inside deepened. Detective Simmons arrived at the house with a team, notebooks in hand, and a sense of unease he hadn't felt in years. He walked through the rooms slowly, touching countertops, opening cabinets, checking closets. Everything was exactly where it should be. Wallets, IDs, even the spare change in jars were untouched. Nothing suggested theft, no indication of an intruder. Yet the family was gone. The detective paused in the kitchen, staring at the half-eaten plate of eggs and toast. "It's like they just disappeared," he whispered to his partner. And that wasn't the most disturbing part. Investigators found the family dog in the backyard later that day, pacing and whining near a fence that led to nowhere. No scratches, no footprints outside, no tire tracks or dragged objects. The dog, loyal and protective, hadn't left the yard, yet the family had somehow vanished. Theories started to swirl almost immediately. Had they left voluntarily? Kidnapped? Witness protection? A sudden accident? Nothing fit. Every possibility crumbled against the same undeniable fact. The house remained perfectly intact. As the first night fell, the town felt different. Lights were left on, doors unlocked, the house standing silently among the other homes. Children whispered about it while playing outside. Adults crossed the street to avoid glancing too long at the empty windows. It was no longer just a missing family, it had become a ghost in plain sight. And still, every detail suggested they hadn't planned to vanish. The calendar circled in. Pencil remained, the unfinished knitting, the tipped chair. All subtle, invisible clues to something no one could yet comprehend. The father's co-workers mentioned he had been stressed lately. Small arguments about bills and deadlines. The mother had confided to a friend about feeling restless, but happy in her life. The teenage son was normal, sometimes moody, but affectionate toward his siblings. The youngest child had brought home a drawing that week, a rainbow under the family's house. Friends insisted there were no signs of fear, threats, or unusual behavior. And yet, the absence of the family screamed louder than any sound could. What no one noticed was the quiet detail of the mailbox. It had been swung open gently, a newspaper sticking out. No handprints, no disturbance in the gravel. Investigators would later realize that even this small, seemingly trivial fact didn't make sense. The family hadn't walked out. Someone or something had orchestrated their departure with meticulous precision. By morning, cameras from nearby homes captured nothing. No movement toward the driveway, no figures on the sidewalks. Just a perfectly ordinary street in a town that now felt anything but ordinary. The police put out a call for information, and neighbors came forward, each repeating the same stories. They hadn't seen anyone leave, heard anything unusual, or sensed danger. The unease deepened, because now everyone understood that this disappearance could not have been accidental. The questions multiplied. Where were they? Who could have taken them without leaving a trace? And why leave the house so perfectly intact, as if daring the world to notice? Investigators began tracing every phone call, every credit card transaction, every minor movement. But the trail went cold almost immediately. What no one realized yet was that this was only the beginning, that the house itself held secrets that would torment everyone who entered it. And for those watching this story, if you're fascinated by mysteries like this, don't forget to hit the like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this chilling case. Detective Simmons stood in the living room, notebook open, but he barely took notes. His eyes kept darting around the space, trying to find something, anything, that didn't belong. "It's like they just evaporated," he muttered, more to himself than to his partner, Officer Lang. Lang frowned. No signs of forced entry, no alarm triggers, nothing. How does a family just vanish? "I don't know," Simmons said, his voice low. "But look at this place. Everything's here, everything. And yet, no one." They moved into the kitchen. The kettle had stopped whistling, but the faint smell of boiled water lingered. Lang picked up a mug. "They weren't planning to leave," he said. "If they were, there'd be evidence, a packed bag, a note, anything. But this is someone else's idea of a perfect disappearance." As the neighbors gathered outside, whispers began to circle. "Did anyone see them leave?" Mrs. Harper asked a young mother nearby. "No," the mother admitted. "I walked by at 11 yesterday morning and the dad was taking out the trash. He waved at me. Everything seemed fine. Then, nothing." What no one noticed, Simmons thought aloud later that evening, was how calm the house looked. Too calm, almost staged. Inside the house, the family's dog had grown restless. It pawed at the door, barked once, then lay down, staring at the staircase. The detective crouched beside the dog, whispering softly, "Where's your family, boy? Where did they go?" The dog whimpered, unsure, and that sound seemed to echo through the empty house like a reminder that someone had been there and now was gone. Meanwhile, the town's school was buzzing with rumors. Teachers discussed the kids' sudden absence in hushed tones. "They never missed school," one teacher whispered. "The older boy, always responsible, always on time. And now, nothing. No calls, no emails, no excuses." Another teacher nodded slowly. "It's like they disappeared into thin air, and I don't think anyone believes that's normal." Investigators pieced together the family's last known movements. The father left for work around 7:30 a.m., kissed his wife on the cheek, reminded the youngest child to eat breakfast, and waved to the teenage son as he left for the bus. The mother stayed behind, tidying the kitchen, humming softly, watching the children leave. By 8 a.m., the house should have been quiet, ordinary, normal. But by noon, every living soul had vanished. Simmons examined the living room again. A small pencil mark on the calendar caught his eye. A single day circled, but no note written beside it. "What no one noticed," he muttered, "is that the day circled is the day they disappeared." Lang tilted his head. "Coincidence?" Simmons shook his head. "Too precise." That evening, neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. No arguments, no shouting, no strange vehicles. Yet the sense of unease hung heavy in the air. By nightfall, some children refused to walk past the house on their way home. Streetlights flickered, and shadows in the empty windows seemed to move, even when the wind was still. The detectives' team returned the next day, bringing in specialists. A forensic analyst examined fingerprints, dust patterns, and even the dog's paw prints. Nothing. The house was untouched, yet lifeless. Every drawer opened, every item checked, still showed no disturbance. Yet the family was gone. Every day, Simmons replayed the scene in his mind. The plates, the kettle, the tipped chair. Investigators would later realize, he said to Lang, that nothing about this disappearance is normal. Not one thing. Simmons and Lang interviewed the neighbors again. Each version of events was nearly identical. One man remembered the teenage boy riding his bike out that morning. "He waved," the man said. "Friendly kid, always smiling. And then, nothing. Nothing after that." Another neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Kendall, whispered about seeing the mother hang laundry the previous evening. I waved and she waved back. She seemed happy, peaceful, and that was it. The next day, the house was silent. The town's gossip mill began churning. Volunteers combed the streets, calling out the family's names. Some reported hearing nothing. Some claimed glimpses of figures in windows that weren't there. Children whispered that they saw shadows move, and parents hushed them, worried about how much the rumors would grow. Simmons walked through the rooms again, silently counting the moments of normalcy now frozen in place. Upstairs, the beds were unmade. The teenage son's homework was stacked neatly on his desk, and the youngest child's favorite toy lay half hidden under the bed. Each detail added a layer of mystery. "It's almost perfect," he muttered. "They weren't planning to leave." Lang frowned. "Then someone took them." "Maybe," Simmons said. "Or maybe they were never meant to be found." The investigation slowly uncovered small, strange details. A window slightly ajar, although it had a sturdy lock. A back gate swinging in the breeze, but no footprints outside. A family car left parked in the driveway, but the keys were inside the house. Simmons noted these details in his journal. "Partial twists," he whispered. "Little things that suggest explanation, but ultimately lead nowhere." As days passed, the community became obsessed. People took turns watching the house, cameras were installed, and theories flourished. Some speculated that the family had planned a sudden disappearance. Others whispered about foul play, claiming someone had orchestrated the vanishing without leaving evidence. Even the police admitted the case defied logic. At the grocery store, a cashier remembered the mother buying extra bread the day before. "She looked distracted," the cashier said, "like she was thinking about something important, but nothing seemed out of place." Another clerk added, "Her children were with her. They seemed normal. And then, just gone." Simmons began keeping track of each timeline, mapping every movement, every minor action, every conversation. Nothing explained the disappearance. He called it the puzzle with missing pieces that don't exist. Every lead led to more questions. What no one noticed was that the clock in the living room had stopped at 11:42 a.m., the exact moment the family vanished. Investigators would later call it chilling, almost symbolic, but there was no proof it was intentional. Tension escalated as the days became weeks. The town refused to forget. Flyers went up. Social media posts circulated. Volunteers searched the woods nearby, and psychics even offered theories. The detective team worked tirelessly, yet every explanation collapsed under scrutiny. What partial twist could explain this? Nothing tangible. Just speculation and fear. One night, as Simmons reviewed the case, Lang burst into the office. "Detective, you need to see this," he said, holding up a small envelope. Inside were photos sent anonymously, images of the house from various angles, but all taken from the outside. No family in sight. But what drew Simmons' attention was a small detail. The curtains in one upstairs window were slightly pulled back, almost like someone had looked out. Simmons leaned back in his chair. "Investigators would later realize," he said, "that these pictures, they weren't helpful, but they hinted at something. Someone watching or waiting." The next day, the town woke to more rumors. Children at school whispered about hearing voices at night. Neighbors claimed the lights flickered in patterns, though electricians found no explanation. The eerie calm of the house became a magnet for attention, a symbol of unanswered questions. By the end of the second week, the investigation shifted focus. Detectives began analyzing phone records, financial accounts, and travel plans. Nothing. No calls, no trips, no withdrawals. It was as if the family had simply ceased to exist in every system that tracked human life. And still, the house remained. The plates, the kettle, the tipped chair, the knitting, the pencil-marked calendar. The unanswered questions hung in the air like smoke. It was as though the home itself was daring the world to notice. For those following this story, if you're captivated by mysteries that defy explanation, make sure you like this video. Leave a comment with your theory and subscribe to stay with us as we continue uncovering the chilling truth behind this disappearance. Days turned into weeks, and still the house sat silently among the other homes, untouched yet brimming with questions. Detective Simmons returned once more, walking slowly through each room as if expecting the family to materialize before his eyes. The faint smell of breakfast lingered, though no one had eaten there in weeks. The kettle remained on the stove, a cold reminder of an interrupted routine. He touched the half-finished knitting lying across the mother's chair. "It's maddening," he whispered. "Everything's here, yet nothing makes sense." Lang peered around the corner of the living room. "Do you think someone inside staged this? Left everything to make us think they vanished on their own?" Simmons shook his head. "No. Whoever did this, they didn't just take a family. They manipulated a world. They turned their home into a stage, and the audience is the entire town." Neighbors continued to share fragmented stories. The teenage son had a friend who remembered seeing him practice his guitar that morning, humming a familiar tune while tapping his fingers on the strings. "He looked happy," the friend said, "completely normal. And then, gone. That's the part that scares me." A neighbor, Mr. Ortiz, mentioned the youngest child had been excited about a school play the week after. "He was talking about it for days," Ortiz said. "He had a line memorized, kept repeating it, and then nothing, not a whisper." The detective team began reviewing security footage from nearby houses. The recordings revealed ordinary movements: cars passing by, people walking dogs, children riding bikes. But between 11:30 a.m. and 12 p.m., the family disappeared from every frame simultaneously. It wasn't a slow departure. It was as if the world swallowed them whole. Simmons tapped the monitor with frustration. Investigators would later realize this is no ordinary disappearance. Partial twists began to emerge. Investigators discovered small anomalies in the family's financial activity. The father had withdrawn a modest sum of cash days before, though it was never accounted for. The mother had called a friend to discuss a weekend trip that never happened. The teenage son had checked out library books that were never returned. Each minor detail teased a possible motive or plan, but nothing explained the total vanishing. What no one noticed, Simmons said during a briefing, was the dog's behavior. He didn't bark at strangers. He didn't run away. He stayed waiting for something that would never happen. Lang shuddered. "It's almost like he knew they weren't coming back." The town's unease grew. Streets once lively became quiet. Children avoided the house on their walks home. Even the local grocery store felt different. People whispered as they passed, glancing over their shoulders. The house had become a symbol of unanswered questions. Rumors flourished. Some claimed a secret was hidden in the walls. Others whispered about the supernatural. Simmons ignored the wild theories, focusing only on the fragments of reality he could analyze. Then came the first breakthrough, or what appeared to be one. A neighbor reported hearing faint music at night, a piano playing a melody the teenage son often practiced. The sound was delicate, melancholic, yet no one could explain how it could occur with no one inside. Simmons called it the haunting detail that begins to fray the line between reality and something else. Weeks later, another clue emerged. A series of letters sent anonymously to the police. Each contained cryptic phrases, Nothing specific, just hints of observation. "They are here but not here," one read. Another, "You look, but you cannot find." Simmons examined them closely. The handwriting was precise, deliberate. It suggested intelligence, planning, someone watching every move. "Partial twists," he muttered. "Evidence that leads nowhere yet taunts the mind." The investigation intensified. Detectives checked travel records, passports, and even obscure border crossings. Nothing. No flights, no trains, no bus tickets. It was as if the family had ceased to exist in every system of movement. The community began to panic silently. Store clerks noticed a man buying large quantities of tape and paper near the house, but when questioned, he disappeared before any identification could be taken. Inside the house, tension escalated. The living room furniture remained in place, but small changes began to appear. A chair slightly turned overnight, a book moved a few inches, the dog sitting where it hadn't before. Simmons began to fear that he wasn't just dealing with a missing family, but with a calculated psychological game. "Someone wants us to look, to feel, to wonder," he said, "and we have nothing but these subtle breadcrumbs." One evening, while reviewing footage of the backyard, Simmons noticed a figure, a shadow, cross the yard at the edge of a camera's view. It moved fast, disappearing as soon as it appeared. Lang leaned in. "Do you think they're alive, hidden nearby?" Simmons hesitated. "I don't know, but it's the first real anomaly we've seen, and yet it tells us nothing definitive." The town became obsessed. Volunteers patrolled the streets, taking turns keeping watch on the house. Every sound, every flicker of light was analyzed. The house became almost sacred, untouchable. People began reporting small signs, footprints leading to the driveway that weren't there the next morning, curtains slightly moved, items on porches rearranged. Simmons called these psychological escalations, small pressures that made everyone question reality. One neighbor confronted the detectives. "Are you sure this isn't supernatural?" she asked. Simmons met her eyes steadily. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that the truth, whatever it is, would be stranger than anything we've imagined." The detectives began constructing theories. Voluntary disappearance? Not enough evidence. Foul play? No signs of struggle. Secret life? Small anomalies hinted at it, but nothing concrete. Every theory crumbled, each partial twist leading only to more questions. Simmons called it a labyrinth of human expectation that ends in emptiness. Then came the most chilling discovery yet. Upstairs, in the youngest child's room, a small diary was found tucked under the mattress. The entries were mundane at first: drawings, daily notes, dreams about school. But the last page was different. A single sentence written in pencil, barely legible yet unmistakably intentional. "They are watching, and we will be gone soon." Lang read it aloud, voice trembling. "Do you think the kids knew?" Simmons shook his head slowly. "It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. But what no one noticed is that this line hints at premeditation, or warning, or both. And we still don't know who wrote it." The days became tense, dark. Investigators worked around the clock, chasing every lead, analyzing every anomaly. The town watched from the shadows, whispers growing into fear. Streetlights flickered like warnings. Children peeked at the house from behind trees. Every step outside the yard felt dangerous, surreal. Simmons felt the psychological pressure mounting too. Every night he returned to his office, replaying images of the house, imagining the family frozen in time, caught somewhere beyond reach. And then came another partial twist. A neighbor reported seeing a car idling in the driveway, lights off just before dawn. When police arrived, It had vanished. No fingerprints, no tire tracks. It was as if it had never existed. Simmons stared at the driveway, exhausted. Investigators would later say this is the moment the case turned from strange to incomprehensible. Small fragments of truth began surfacing slowly. The mother had confided in a friend about a recurring nightmare involving shadows in the home. The father had been unusually protective over his children the week before. The teenage son had been secretive about his online activity, though nothing incriminating was found. Each revelation hinted at complexity, but didn't reveal the whole picture. By the end of the third week, it was clear to everyone involved. The house held secrets. Every object, every placement, every subtle anomaly seemed deliberate. The family's life had been normal, safe, ordinary. And yet, the world they left behind had been transformed into a psychological puzzle that would haunt the town for years. For those following this story, if your heart is racing and you're wondering what really happened, make sure you comment your theories below, like this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the final shocking revelations that will change everything we thought we knew about this vanishing family. Weeks had passed and still the house held its secrets. But one rainy afternoon, a breakthrough came, not from a tip, a witness, or a clue, but from the smallest of details. Simmons noticed a tiny scrap of paper tucked behind the living room curtains. It was a receipt, dated the day before the disappearance, for a storage unit several miles away. The handwriting matched neither parent nor child. Lang leaned in. So, someone planned this? Simmons nodded slowly. It's the first piece that suggests intent, but who? And why? Investigators moved quickly to the storage facility. Inside they found personal belongings, some clothing, family photos, a few books, but nothing substantial. It was almost as if whoever had moved them wanted the world to see evidence but not the family. The realization hit Simmons with a cold clarity. This disappearance was deliberate. Someone orchestrated every detail, controlling what was left behind and what vanished. Then came the final twist. Digital forensic analysis revealed an unusual pattern in the family's home devices. Phones, tablets, even the smart thermostat had been remotely accessed during the morning of the disappearance. Someone had been inside their digital life, watching, tracking, and perhaps controlling the environment. The house itself had been manipulated, making it appear frozen in time, while the family slipped away or was taken, without a trace. Partial truths emerged slowly. The mother's calls to her friend about a weekend trip had been intercepted, misdirecting investigators. The father's cash withdrawal had been part of a decoy, leading nowhere. The teenage son's library books had been returned early, unseen. Everything was part of a careful plan designed to bewilder anyone looking too closely. Simmons walked through the empty rooms one last time. The dog slept quietly in the corner, as if exhausted from waiting. The living room felt smaller now, suffocating. Every object was a frozen piece of a puzzle. Every anomaly a calculated, psychological pressure. He whispered to Lang, "We finally know it wasn't random. But the truth, the full truth, is darker than we imagined." The final piece came from the storage unit's security footage. A figure appeared, slightly hunched, careful, moving through the unit alone. The timestamp matched the morning of the disappearance. The figure carried only small boxes, never large enough to hold an entire family. But what Simmons saw made his stomach twist. The person paused, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. A chilling, satisfied smile, as if they had played the entire town like puppets. The investigators pieced together a grim conclusion. The family hadn't left willingly. They had been coerced, perhaps manipulated, by someone who knew them intimately. Each detail left behind, the plates, the kettle, the tipped chair, was designed to create confusion, to make the disappearance seem impossible, to keep hope alive and sanity questioning. The house itself had become a trap for the human mind. The community struggled to comprehend. Friends mourned in silence, unsure whether to hope or despair. Teachers closed classrooms with whispers about the children. Neighbors avoided the empty house, though some couldn't resist looking through the windows, searching for signs that would never appear. Each sighting, each imagined shadow, kept the story alive, haunting every corner of the town. Then came the haunting detail that no one could shake. In the youngest child's room under the bed was a small music box. It was the child's favorite, playing a gentle, familiar tune. But when investigators wound it, it didn't play the song as expected. Instead, it emitted a distorted, haunting melody, warped, echoing, unsettling. Simmons stared at it for long minutes. Investigators would later say, he whispered to Lang, this music box, it's the last reminder of a normal life twisted into something unrecognizable. The aftermath was profound. Court cases never fully developed. There was no one to prosecute, no bodies, no suspects conclusively identified. The house remained untouched, almost a shrine to absence. The family, their lives, their laughter, their routines, became nothing more than memories frozen in time, and the puzzle of their disappearance became a legend. The psychological weight on the town persisted for years, a quiet, constant unease. Some months later, neighbors reported a single fleeting shadow in one of the upstairs windows at dusk. Others claimed they heard footsteps inside the house late at night, though no one had entered. Children still whispered as they passed, feeling eyes watching them. The house had become more than a building. It was a presence, a monument to a disappearance that refused to be explained. The detective team eventually closed the case, labeling it unresolved. But Simmons never stopped thinking about it. Every detail, every anomaly, every small psychological manipulation remained vivid in his mind. He had learned that some mysteries cannot be solved, that some disappearances are designed to torment not only those left behind, but anyone who dares to search for answers. And so the house stood, the dog long gone, the neighborhood moving on. Yet the story lived on in whispers, in conversations, in late-night reflections. People still wondered, still speculated, still felt the invisible weight of absence whenever they glanced at its empty windows. For those watching this story, take a moment to reflect. Imagine your own home frozen in time. Your family vanished, leaving no explanation, no trace, only questions. That is the reality of the vanishing family that left their house completely intact. And if this story gripped you, if your heart raced as you tried to imagine the impossible, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button and leave a comment with your thoughts. Share your theories, because in stories like this, the questions are often more haunting than the answers. Some mysteries never end, some houses never forget, and some disappearances remain etched in the mind forever. The vanishing family remains gone, their home untouched, a frozen echo of lives that existed and vanished without a trace.